Welcome back, investors. Chapter number 2 in this training, Value Investing with VinleyAI. So what I will be showing you, and again, I'm not going into all the details, what is value investing, why I have chosen some metrics together with the team in the tool. That's part of the other value investing training. But here I'm just showing you the process, how a typical investment process would look like. So first things first, of course, is setting up your portfolio and your watch list, okay? Something that you didn't have in VinleyGPT before. So the first thing that you have to do, at least we recommend you, is that, you're going to have first an empty screen here. You will have to decide which ETFs and stocks you want to add either into your watch list or into your portfolio. If you're adding it into your watch list, you just click on add watch list, say add, and it will, as shown here, quantities, costs, etc. will be put to 0. If you're adding it as an asset in your portfolio, of course, you will have to tell what is the quantity, the purchase price. The purchase currency will be set by default because that is linked to the ticker, and the purchase date. Okay, so and then you click on add, and this then gives you this type of result where you have, this is an example where you have assets that are yellow flagged here, which are assets that you have in your portfolio, and then it gives you comparison. The typical type of thing that you find on financial investment websites. And here you have the assets that are just on the watch list, but the advantage is that you're going to have them available afterwards. So all of them, and you can of course click here on portfolio watch list if you want to run analysis on those companies. So this is to explain to you how to first of all populate your portfolio and or watch list. For the time being, ETF stocks, crypto assets will come very, very soon in Vinley 1.2. The typical next step that I do after having populated my watch list and my portfolio is I analyze the fundamentals, and I'll start with the fundamentals of the company. I'm not an ETF investor, I have to be honest about this, but I know that a lot of you are also a mix between value investors and ETF investors. So I'm showing you here both things in fundamentals. So the first thing is, when you go then to the fundamental screen, you just, you can either search if the ticker is not available here, neither in your watch list nor in your portfolio. You can of course search here and analyze a company that is not even in your watch list or portfolio. Of course, that's normal. But otherwise, this is like a quick navigation bar where you can just click on the ticker here, and it will then fetch all the data that you want. Here I'm in the fundamental analysis screen. So you're gonna be having, for stocks, it fetches the information, the fundamental analysis metrics, so like reliability of financials, profitability, solvency and financial strength, relative valuation, those type of things. So typical things that we were doing already before in VinleyGPT, and the typical things that I recommend to do when performing a fundamental analysis. And then, of course, what you can do is send a prompt to the AI, and you can say to Vinley, analyze me the fundamentals. For ETFs, you see that actually, Vinley knows that when the user selects an ETF, that the information is not the same than stock information. So you're going to have, of course, the asset information, but you're going to have like the sector weightings, the country weightings, and you're going to have immediately the AI agent available on the ETFs. You're going to have also the expense rate. You can also here click on, I'm not sure if you're seeing my mouse here, but you can click here and ask Vinley what are the holdings that the ETF actually has. So that's something for the time being that is done through a prompt, for example. So this is what I was showing you here. So zooming in here, so you see that clicking, again, I was using LVMH here. So you have key information, asset information, company description, because sometimes you're analyzing a company and you're interested just to know what is the company basically doing. And you have, so this is our method, the reliability of financial solvency, profitability, passive income, and you have the relative valuation as well on the right hand side. So that's analyzing the fundamentals. If the fundamentals look okay, and ask Vinley what is the opinion of Vinley about the fundamentals by clicking on this arrow and asking Vinley to assess the fundamentals. Well, then the typical thing that I do next is, okay, the fundamentals look solid. I understand the business of the company. What is the intrinsic valuation of the company now? Because the market is giving me today a share price, and I want to know actually what is the company really worth versus what the market is giving me today in terms of share price. So there you go typically into the second screen, which is the valuation level 2 screen, we call it. And there, in fact, Vinley will do let's say, pre-calculations for you, where you don't have to send a prompt. It will immediately come in the user interface. So you're going to have, first of all, relative valuation measures. You're going to have immediately, even without sending a prompt, the calculation of the intrinsic valuation discounted cash flow, intrinsic valuation discounted future earnings, and intrinsic valuation dividend discounts model. Of course, that's going to be zero, the DDM, if the company is not paying out any dividends, of course, right? We agree. And what you will see when you will leverage VinleyAI, it will actually do what is called sensitivity analysis. So that's something that was for me very important as an investor, and is still today, even as an independent board director, very important. When you think about investments, you, as I said in the introduction, need to think what is the cost of capital and what is the expected growth rate for a business plan, for example. What Vinley will do automatically, and you're going to see actually the sliders move automatically when you click on the company on the left, it will predetermine for you what is the average growth rate on free cash flow for the last 3 years. Maybe some of you would not like to use a 3-year free cash flow. We will be enhancing the user interface here and adding, so showing you the 3 values that we have, because we have also growth, not just on the free cash flow, but for example on net income and on revenue. We have decided for the time being just to do it on the 3-year average on free cash flow. And we are using from New York University, so this is what Aswat Dasmodaran is doing with his students, and I'm thankful for that. He knows that we are using his database. We are actually making, when a company, we have to calculate the intrinsic value, it actually uses the industry cost of capital as a proxy for the company. And what it does as well, when it does those, it analyzes those 2 variables per default. If the growth rate has been negative, as we have to project the intrinsic value, that's a future projection of earnings or of cash flows, Vinley will automatically set the growth to 0, and it will tell it to you. So it will actually have here a message where it says, I've set the growth rate to 0% because the 3-year average growth rate on free cash flow was minus 4.16%, for example. And if it is above 10%, we have decided to cap it at 10%. You have sometimes companies that grow at 25% over the last 3 years, but that's more like growth investing. We have decided that, and you can change this, of course. I mean, you can modify the sliders as you want, and it will recalculate the IV. I mean, of course, right? We just feel that when you're doing a valuation of a company for the next 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, and the company is growing at 78%, the company will not be able to continue growing at 78%, okay? So that's why we said if the sensitivity analysis on the growth is above 10%, we're going to cap it at 10. We're going to mention it. So you're going to see in the explanation of Vinley here, it will say that I have capped the growth, and it will tell you what was actually the original 3-year average historical free cash flow growth. Okay, so this is what we call sensitivity analysis. And then what you can do, of course, you can send prompts. You can say, assess the IV like Warren Buffett, assess the IV like Peter Lynch, assess the IV like Joel Greenblatt. So Warren Buffett, I mean, for those who have done the other value investing training, that's a typical intrinsic value DCF, discounted future earnings and dividend discount model. For Peter Lynch, is going to be the price to earnings growth, the price to earnings growth yield, and for Joel Greenblatt, is going to be the earnings yield. So that's a little bit what is different in those 3 methods. And I have to be honest, I'm more a Warren Buffett type of investor. But we have users who like to have the perspective of Peter Lynch. If Peter Lynch would be in the room, how would he assess the company? And the same for Joel Greenblatt. Then, so we did fundamentals analysis, looking, are the financials reliable? I mean, the aggregated score of the Benny-Jam score, the other ratios, are they okay? Bankruptcy risk, solvency risk, so profitability, those type of things. Then we did absolute valuation, that's the second step. And then the next step that I typically do is looking at the moat. Does the company have a moat? So a strategic competitive advantage that is difficult to attack by competition. So I'm sticking here with my example of LVMH. So one of the tickers of LVMH is MC.PA on the Paris Stock Exchange. And so just to explain what we have in moats. In moats, we have rough cut 13 years of the top 100 brands in the world. So Vinley will tell you, for any company, it will say here yes or no, is the company part of the top 100 global brands? And it will then So here you see with the LVMH, LVMH has multiple brands in the top 100. They actually have 5. So Louis Vuitton, Tiffany's & Co. that they bought a couple of years ago. Dior, I think it's Christian Dior, if I'm not mistaken. Hennessy, I think that's like whiskey cognac. Sorry, that's maybe not the right term. But this is like alcoholic drinks. And then they have Sephora, which is cosmetic retail shops. So those are 5 brands that LVMH has in the top 100. We only have the top 100 in the world currently for the last 13 years. So please bear with us on that. Then what we have as well is, and that's own curated data, we have selected, I think it's 389 companies that have a wide moat or a narrow moat. And this will be then explained here, and we are updating this on an annual basis. Of course, we are looking at also publicly available information, but we are trying to be strategic here on when we say company has a wide moat or a narrow moat. And I've been running webinars about this in September, October timeline 2025. We do have now for nearly 2,000 companies of the 38,000. So it's true, it's just 5%, but those are the largest companies in the world where we were able actually to get data from Comparably about, which is publicly available data, but we are just aggregating that data. And this is available in the, for any user. So you don't need a paid subscription in Vinley to have access to this information. So you're going to have access to customer and employee satisfaction information. So what we call the Net Promoter Score and the Employee Net Promoter Score. And it will show you on the right-hand side a couple of metrics. We have added a couple of metrics. I will not go today into that. What is the customer happiness score and the management quality score, which is an aggregated score of the 3 sub-metrics that we have for customers and for employees. But I think it's important to know, are customers happy about the company? Are employees happy about the company or not? Then the last thing that I typically do, at least from an investment process perspective, is looking at this requires a little bit more, let's say, knowledge in corporate finance. I look at, so I do forensic accounting, in fact. So what is forensic accounting? And of course, I want to make this available to my students and to our users in VinleyAI, or we want to make this available to all of you as well. It's about productivity and efficiency. I really promise you, and no arrogance here, I promise you that there are only a few platforms that have, for example, the Danish M score available. So you're going to have access to a couple of things in forensic and accounting. And you see it's again in the analysis sub-screen, you have forensics, which is here. So you're going to have access to the Danish M score first. So the Danish M score tells you if the earnings are manipulated or not. At least if there are signals of manipulation, yes or no. What Vinley will do is you just have to either click or search on an asset that would not be in your watch list or in your portfolio, but you can also click on the assets that are in your watch list or in your portfolio. And it will fetch the latest available annual filing, and it will calculate the Danish M score, aggregated. And you're going to have even the variables available here. We are adding a small label that you understand what are those 8 sub-variables that actually make up the Danish aggregated M score. If you don't know, just click here on the prompt and ask Vinley to analyze the Danish M score in detail. And it will send a prompt where you will have an explanation for the 8 sub-variables, which are okay, which are not okay. But this, of course, requires a little bit of accounting knowledge, because the Danish M score relies a lot on the 3 financial reports: balance sheet, income statement, and cash flow statement. Mostly balance sheet and income statement, if I recall that correctly. And then what I believe is the most powerful currently function in terms of forensic accounting in Vinley is this one. So you can actually, just by clicking on this arrow, of course you can prompt if you want differently, but just by clicking on this arrow, and as I said earlier, it's okay to be lazy. I'm sometimes lazy. I just want to know from Vinley, I want to invest my money into this company. Beyond the Danish M score, there are other metrics that I believe are important. These are the 4 that we are currently analyzing from a forensic accounting perspective. The Danish M score up to 10 years. I promise you, I've not seen one single platform, financial platform, having this. The second one is a bankruptcy risk. So you're going to see up to 10 years back how the bankruptcy risk, or the Altman Z-score, has been evolving. On top of that, the Sloan ratio. The Sloan ratio is a metric that looks at the quality of earnings, because in fact you could manipulate earnings through accrual. So sending out fake invoices, and as nobody will be paying those invoices will sit in accounts receivables, for those who know how this works in a balance sheet. And then Benford's law, that's something that financial auditors know. So this is something also very specific. I have seen outside of Vinley, and I'm saying this with a lot of humility, nobody providing this type of information. And I tell you, this was complex to program in Vinley. So because, I mean, this is the calculations. One thing that maybe I could have mentioned, sorry, those calculations are not done by the AI. Those calculations are done by our algorithms, okay? So just to avoid hallucinations. And the Benford looks at, so this is a law that financial auditors use when they analyze a sample of financial transactions. There is, according to Benford, this has been observed, a natural distribution of the first digits of numbers. So a 1 digit will appear, for example, twice as much as a 2 digit. And the 3 digits will even be less, let's say, available in everything, in nature, in financial reports, etc. This is basically what Benford's law is looking at. And what financial auditors actually do, maybe you didn't know this, is that Benford's law is analyzing, and the auditors do this really, they analyze just by looking at the numbers and the first digit of a number if there is a risk that the numbers have been manipulated. Because when, for example, a CFO, he or she manipulates the numbers, they're going to make mistakes and will disrespect the natural distribution appearance of first digits as they appear in nature and in financial reports. So this is something, I have to be honest, very evolved, but it's interesting. So I recommend you, and this is what I do as a fourth step before I invest into a company. And I'm giving you here an example of Hyatt, which was one of the companies lately which had a bad Bennish AM score. So there are elements that suggest that it could be that Hyatt is manipulating their earnings. This is the latest 2025 annual report. I think it came out a month ago, so in February, if I'm not mistaken. And then you see on the right-hand side, I just clicked here on the arrow, and it sends this prompt, provide a multi-annual forensic analysis for company H, because of course I had selected company H here. And it will provide me, in fact, the results and interpretation. So again, I'm just showing you how I execute a typical investment process using VinleyAI. Voilà, that's it. So I will just conclude in the next very short lecture. I hope that this is useful for you and that you see, maybe if I can come back here to this slide, this is a typical process I do. So the first one is just building up my portfolio and watch list, and then going through fundamentals, valuation, moat, and forensic accounting, specifically for companies, because I'm a value investor and I typically invest just into companies. But you have also ETFs that you can add to your portfolio, but you will not have for the time being the same depth of analysis that you have with stocks. Hope this is useful, and talk to you in the conclusion. Thank you.